We're glad to have you with us. Starting the weekday up with, or the work week up with a 6-game NBA slate. I'm Dave Loughran, that fine fella to my, I think you're to my right, not sure. You're next to me is Adam Scherer, back in the saddle again, not in San Francisco. Hey man, glad to have you back.
Yeah, excited to be home for a week and a half. Nice to be in my own bed and research my own desk and everything. So excited to be back.
I'm not going to lie, man. Flying right now is kind of scary with all this Boeing news.
No shit, man. So when I
Right?
went to Miami for NBA All-Star break, and I was getting ready to fly back home, and that's when that
The
cargo
Amazon,
jet from Miami crashed outside of Houston.
the freighter, the one that was carrying the Amazon one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then yesterday, I'm in my hotel room getting ready to fly back from San Francisco, and I open up Twitter and get the news about the one in the Air Ethiopia jet.
Crazy.
Like,
there was another one in October too, and it was the 737 like 8 Max or something that it's called.
So now they're like all the airlines are canceling that and not using those anymore.
Yeah, they're grounding them. Although I've heard the ones in America aren't. Something about all. I mean, I don't know all of the news on. I saw it earlier today. The Boeing stock plunged by $30 at the open today. Yeah. Just pre-market.
So the Chinese government, like most of the airlines over there, grounded them on their own, and then the Chinese government put in a mandate that they had to ground them.
Wow, it's a damn shame, man. There were 8 Americans, I think 157 on board. It's crazy. And oddly, it's still so much rare to see fatal plane crashes. So much more rare than a car crash.
Yeah, like it's terrifying because if you get in a plane crash, you're dead.
Right.
But
right.
Like, they just crash so much less frequently.
Unless you have Sully flying it, and then you're
right.
Then you're in good shape, man. He'll land you anywhere. Doesn't matter. He'll land you on top of the Swiss Alps. Doesn't matter. Oh, Deshaun Jackson to the Eagles. That's exciting. And Nick Foles too. You see that? BDN got paid.
Yeah. So did Landon Collins.
Yeah. It's going to be pretty fun. March 13th. March 13th when we'll see more news, but we've gotten a lot already. I know everyone wants to hear basketball, but because we like sports, I'm going to ask you, what are your thoughts on the whole Pittsburgh Steelers AB debacle, getting a third and a fifth for him when they traded Martavis Bryant last year for a third, and now they're stuck with $20 million in dead cap? You think it was necessary? What do you see this being as?
I mean, I don't think they could keep him. I think they were kind of painted into a corner. They had to do something.
Yeah, I think so too. They didn't have much of a choice, man. But it's crazy to think that 2 of the best players in the league, in Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, are no longer going to be on that team. And, just because.
Did you see the tweet suggesting that Bell's going to the Ravens too?
To the Ravens? Or oh God, to a division rival?
Yeah.
I didn't see that. No.
Kabar Baja Biamila or whatever his name is, tweeted out yesterday that it was like he didn't flat out say the Ravens, but he did things in his tweet like mention Edgar Allan Poe and quote the poem The Raven and
great.
Say that a bird told him.
That's great. Oh, man. All right, well, that's enough of that. Let's jump right into it. 6 games. We'll kick it off with Cleveland at home against Toronto. I got to ask you, like, I know we try not to be too one game centric, too focused on one game, but this Washington-Sacramento game is just jam-packed with the best plays on the slate.
Yeah, I told Josh that the NBA should have just like flexed that to the 10:30 game. Let Boston and the Clippers pretend they're playing in Boston and just make that the late night hammer.
Yeah, for sure. Boston and Clippers should be okay. But anyway, we'll kick it off with one that's a little bit less appealing. Cleveland at home hosting the Toronto Raptors. Raptors, 8.5-point road favorites, 222 total here. Kawhi Leonard's in after resting again. And Kyle Lowry, there was some word that maybe he would be questionable, wouldn't play, but he's expected to play. So everyone's good on that end. And then you have Larry Nance, Matthew Dellavedova, and Tristan Thompson all out. Let's start with the home team in Cleveland. There isn't a ton to get into here, but I want to talk about the front court, Adam, with Ante Dzidzic, with Marquise Chris, you name it. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so it's weird because Cleveland's actually the more appealing DFS team for me out of these two teams today. And really coming from the front court. You have Zizic, who I assume will get the start. And earlier this year, we were seeing him approach 30 minutes in games that he started. He had pretty much been blowout proof as well. You remember that game against, I think it was against Utah, when he had like 9 points through 3/4 of a blowout and then just doubled in the fourth quarter because he got run when no one else did. So, I think that he's a good value play. The problem is that he is a center, and there are a few just really, really good center plays on the slate, but he's so cheap that it's still tough, not to like him, because he's 3,900 on DraftKings. I think he's like 36 on FanDuel. So I was getting a lot of him in my initial crunches. Marquise Chris scares me a lot, but he's been greater than a fantasy point per minute player, and he's essentially minimum price. So even when you factor in the tough matchup against Toronto, all I have to do is project him for about 24 minutes, and he gets into a lot of my lineups. If he gets more than that, then obviously he'd get more, and it's kind of hard to see him getting less. So I think that both of those guys are really interesting from a value standpoint. And then Kevin Love on DraftKings in particular at 7,700. I didn't get as much of him once the Jason Tatum news broke, just because there were more forward plays, but in a vacuum still, 7,700 for a guy with about a 28% usage rate and a 20% rebounding percentage, there's certainly upside for him there.
Absolutely. So with Zizic and Marquise Chris, have you crunched yet?
I did, but it was on a different computer, so I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. So I have a better way of putting it. When it comes to Chris and Zizic, how much would you be happy with, and how much, if you crunch it, would you say, God, that's too much? I don't like that. Because the reason I ask you this is there are a lot of cheap centers today that are all carrying significant risk, whether it be Charlotte's big front court, whether it be Cleveland's front court. Ed Davis has been a topic of discussion, and more. So I want to get your read on this, and then we'll do that again once we get to these other teams.
Yeah, so it depends on the site too, because FanDuel center pricing obviously is tighter. So I'm okay with getting more of him there. On DraftKings, I still think that I get probably somewhere in the 20 to 25% range, but it won't be as much because you have a very clearly underpriced Gobert, a very clearly underpriced Andre Drummond. Yep. You have Capella in a very nice spot. You have Biyombo who just opened up.
Al Horford's in a good spot too.
Yeah. You have Horford, power forward eligible, but still you have Horford. So there, Jared Allen on DraftKings is at a much different price tag than on FanDuel. So I think it's just a little bit tougher to get him in huge amounts on DraftKings.
Okay. That sounds good to me. Marquise Chris is just one of those guys that you can look at his per minute numbers this season and be like, oh, he's not that far below, fantasy point per minute, but he's not a great rebounder, although he's done a little bit of better job of boxing guys out this year when he gets minutes. And you need him to shoot well from 3-point range or else he's doing nothing. He's not one of my preferred value guys, but I can see him ending up in some lineups just because he's so cheap. Anybody else for this team? I don't really look. It's not a great matchup. So if I'm looking to Cleveland, it's going to be because they're discounted, and I don't think they're that risky given that they do get minutes. But when I know Delly's out, but when it comes to Clarkson and Sexton and those guys, I just don't see the value there against the Raptors.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything out of the cheap guys in the front court just becomes, kind of fringe plays for me, where they're cheap enough given their minutes that they're kind of appealing, like Chetty, especially. Chetty, Clarkson to an extent, Sexton to an extent, but really just fringe, borderline, tournament plays for me, as opposed to guys that I think I'll be getting a pretty healthy amount of, like Zizic and Chris.
All right. On the other side, Kawhi Leonard, as I said, he's active today. I'm sure he'll sit on the next one, but he's here today. I'll tell you what, I still, despite his price point being, even further down than it's been, still didn't end up on all that much Kawhi Leonard, and I'm okay with that. I was okay with it the other day. I'm okay with it today, and one of the reasons for this, I'm going to go across positions, not just small forward, Adam, but, on DraftKings, where you're like, oh, man, he's only 8,600. Well, Irving's 8,900. Jason Tatum's out. Andre Drummond's 9,100. I don't even have a problem with Beal at that 97. Donnie Mitchell, 84 with no Rubio, no Neto. Blake Griffin, 83. Now, look, I'm not saying all of these guys are my top options. What I'm saying is that comparatively or relatively speaking, it's not like Kawhi Leonard is outrageously underpriced when you've got a bunch of other guys who are too cheap as well, and they're all very, very similarly priced on DraftKings. So that's where I'm at on Kawhi Leonard. I can understand why you would like him. I can understand why, you see him having producing big numbers against Cleveland. I just don't have him as a priority simply because he's 8,600. That's not enough to move the needle for me.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. It's a nice price tag for Kawhi Leonard. It's just not as nice a price tag for Kawhi Leonard as it is for most of those guys that you named. We've talked before about, especially in tournaments, where you want to embrace volatility and embrace these guys that, sometimes they do give you a bad game, but other times they really can, go above and beyond and give you these monster games. He's one of the least volatile players in his price range. So it makes it appealing for cash games, but for tournaments, he just doesn't deviate from his projection all that by as much. So it's tougher to get there than it is to get some of these other guys, especially also it's a fully healthy Toronto team, and like you said, Boston's missing Tatum. You have Mitchell without Rubio. Like you just have spots that you can go to where guys are a little bit underpriced because of circumstances.
Agreed. That's where I'm at as well. The rest of Toronto, I'm having a tough time really falling in love with any of them. Either Kyle Lowry, the one thing is he's getting a ton of minutes, right? Like you're saying big minutes from him. But in that same breath, I have De'Aaron Fox, who is facing the Wizards, who have been arguably the worst team at defending opposing backcourts all year long. And you also have guys like Chris Paul who are cheap. Where do you land on Kyle Lowry?
Not getting a lot of him, not getting a lot of Toronto at all, which is obviously scary against Cleveland. But I just think for the most part, they're priced pretty correctly. Lowry is correct to me. Siakam, maybe a little bit of breathing room there, but there are enough cheap Fords now on this slate that I don't really see the need to pay for him and, a huge percentage of lineups. So, even though Toronto does have a healthy 116 total, they're on the road, against one of the worst teams defensively in the league. It's just still not a lot of guys that I get to because I prefer other plays from other teams.
Me too. Anything else on this game before we move on?
No. Nope.
All right, let's talk about Washington, Sacramento. I have a feeling we could stay here for a while, Adam.
Yeah.
All right. The Washington Wizards they were 2-point favorites last night when I recorded the early bird with Dan Strafford. They're 1-point dogs today, which is perfectly fine. This game should be competitive. A behemoth 240 total. Expected to be a very competitive game. We can start wherever. I mean, when I wrote the deep dive today, you can find it on awesomemode.com. I wasn't even bashful about listing almost every starter in the article. Usually, and you're the same way, I'm sure. You try to differentiate a bit, right? You try and mix it up a little bit. But if I'm talking about the best plays at each position, I can't ignore them just because I've already mentioned 3 or 4 guys on the same team. So when you talk about Satoransky and Beal and Portis and Parker, there are all guys on both sides. We'll start with Washington that pop out as good plays, especially some on DraftKings where their prices are still very low.
Right. So it's a spot where I put some rules in place to kind of try and limit who I have with who on teams. But,
yeah,
it's not a spot where I'm looking to just, avoid players from this game. Like Buddy Hield's my favorite play in the game. 7,400 on DraftKings, 70, I think 2 on FanDuel. 74 on FanDuel also. But facing a Washington team that's been terrible at defending against threes, they're really terrible at defending almost everything. But one of the most accurate three-point shooters in the NBA, playing around 36 minutes a night, fast-paced game. Both these teams play fast. Washington plays faster. I absolutely love Hield here. I think he'll be one of my highest owned players on either site. I'm kind of lower on the Kings than I expected to be. I like them. They're just not jumping off quite as much as I expected for me. But, I still like Bielitsa, who played 28 minutes last game. I have him at 26 here, and that's enough at 4,200 on DraftKings to get him into a bunch of lineups. Bogdanovich at 5,500 is a perfectly good play. De'Aaron Fox, you mentioned, it kind of scares me how little of him I am getting, at least initially. It's a spot that, obviously I like taking guys against Washington. I think it is worth pointing out, and you mentioned it when we talked about Kemba last game, the one thing Washington has been able to do well defensively this year is defend the pick and roll. Fox ranks 17th in the NBA in pick and roll possessions per game, about 2/3, I think it was, of his possessions come in the pick and roll. I don't think I have it up anymore. But he is a pick and roll point guard, and it is a spot where Washington's been good. So just like we talked about with Kemba, that one stat shouldn't be something that makes or breaks your decision. It is just a point where, Washington might actually be able to have a little bit of success against them.
Yeah, no question. And you're right. We did talk about that with Kemba. That was actually, I think I mentioned it on the show. I think we both did that game was one where I actually was leaning a little towards Lamb because Lamb is a better mid-range guy than Kemba, in terms of volume, getting more of his shots from mid-range. But when you're looking, I have it pulled up for you, by the way. De'Aaron Fox pick and roll possessions per game, 7.6 per game. So it's nothing crazy. It's like Kemba's 12 per game. Yeah. Fox is 7.6. I'd say he's like 20th. I'm not going to count them all out, but around
he's
20th.
17th. He's 17th.
17th. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, 41% frequency.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to say 41% frequency. So, look, that obviously, like you said, it makes him slightly less appealing. What kind of mitigates that for me, though, is number one, I think we all know they're probably not making the playoffs, but they're still fighting. They're the 9th in the West, and we've seen Fox play really big minutes over his last couple games, 35, 37 minutes. I expect to see another 35 minutes tonight. Just given his per minute production alone, 7,300 to me is not that crazy. I don't see him as a. Here, let me ask you this: how much Chris Paul are you landing on DraftKings?
A lot.
Okay, so that's okay. This is where we differ because I don't have Chris Paul that far ahead of De'Aaron Fox.
I have Paul hang on. My projections got messed up. I have Paul a couple points ahead of Fox. Not a huge difference, but enough where at a cheaper price tag and a couple more points, I'm getting a lot more.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean that again, though. That's where probably you and I are different here. Chris Paul also on the second leg of a back-to-back for whatever that's worth. We'll get to that game for sure, though. Satoransky is not a high-volume shooter. He looks like he just smelled a fart in his DraftKings headshot. And he does. I mean, really pull this up. It looks like he farted in a small room, smelled it, and is smirking because everyone else is dealing with it as he basks in his own stench. I'm telling you, when you look, you're going to be, what are you talking? When you look at it, you're going to say, that is exactly what I would imagine. But he's around 0.86, I think, fantasy points per minute since the trade deadline. And the deadline was very important for this Washington team because they made so many changes. And John Wall's been out now since the end of December. And Satoransky, to me, is going to play. He's played 36 or more minutes in regulation in 3 straight games. I expect him to get a ton of run today, Adam. So, while he's not a high volume guy, low usage, not the best per minute guy, if you're getting 36 minutes against Sacramento, I can live with that.
Yeah, he graded out really well for me on both sites. Very appealing price tags. And he's just at a lower price tier than the really stacked guard tier where between really 7K and 10K where you just have all these guys, you can save a little bit of money and get down to Satoransky. So I think that he's a pretty strong player. We had seen his minutes look like maybe they were going to disappear a little bit with Washington running out some bigger lineups with Jeff Green at the 3 and Ariza at the 2, but they haven't been doing that over the last few games. We've seen Satoransky go back to playing a ton of minutes, so I do really like him.
So do I. All right, now I just want to get a little bit deeper here on Bradley Beal. Normally, I'd look at that price point and say, "Oh, that's kind of tough." Look, I promise you, we're not just going to talk DraftKings, but it's a little bit different here, just because some of their prices are wild today. We will get to everything specific and relevant to FanDuel as well. I can promise you that. And Satoransky's in play on both of those sites. In case you're wondering, he's projected to be significantly chalkier on DraftKings, I think 34% right now. Let's see if we'll wait on an update. When we get our ownership update, I'll let you know. Chris Paul with the highest projected ownership on FanDuel, followed by Satoransky. Or sorry, that's DraftKings. Yeah. On FanDuel, it's Satoransky second, but higher percentage. And it makes sense. You got to play 2 of them. So anyway, Adam, Bradley Beal has been incredible since Washington made these personnel changes on February 8th. He's averaging 30 points, 7.8 rebounds, 7.8 assists, 5.6 rebounds, 2 steals, and 54.4 DraftKings points per game. Now, where that ranks in relation to the league, Beal's 5th in league scoring, 8th in assists, 2nd in steals, and 7th in fantasy points. So if you take a $9,700 price point, that's really not that far off. I mean, he has been doing what a player would do around that salary, and now he's facing a Kings team that is tied with the Hawks for the league lead in pace on the season. And he's playing 40 minutes every night. I don't have an issue with Bradley Beal today at this price point.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add was over 14 games, he's averaging 39.5 minutes per game.
Crazy.
That's insane.
It's crazy. And he's still second behind Paul George.
Right. Josh and I talked about it this morning, how for most players, the highest I'll really project their minutes is 36 on any given night. For a few players, I'll put it at 38. And then for Bradley Beal, I'll put it at 40.
I know. It's crazy.
He plays 43 and he plays 37 sometimes.
Yeah.
Kevin Love will play. So
he's sitting tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to have a fun day tomorrow. There's already been like 12 things that have dropped.
I know.
But yeah, so I mean, it's one of those where you get a little bit of sticker shock when you look at Beal, but he's completely justified that price tag. You know, you talk about 1.3 points per minute over 40 minutes on average, and now you're getting a very fast-paced game where both teams play fast. Beal's really taken the offense on his shoulders from, you know, a scoring standpoint and from a facilitator standpoint. So I do still like Beal a lot. Him and Satoransky are my two favorite plays from Washington. Hield's my favorite play from Sacramento. Those are the three guys that I think I'll have the most of from this game. And then I'll have, you know, the other guys mixed and matched in.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at as well. Beal, Satoransky, Buddy Hield, man, that price point on FanDuel, 7,400 is very appealing. I mean, he leads the league. He leads his team in usage over the last month, 29%. No one else is even close. So, you know, Buddy Hield runs no risk of losing opportunity. Bjelica is playing around 30 minutes over his last 2 games. I don't know. Here, let me ask you this. We talked about setting limits and groups on this. Here's an important one. You have Bogdanovich, you have Bjelica, you have Harrison Barnes. Bjelica has been coming in for Bogdanovich and then coming out for Harrison Barnes. It makes sense. What minutes are you projecting the 3 of these guys at today? I think obviously Harrison Barnes is the safest to project around 36, 37. What about outside of that?
I have Barnes at 36. I have Bogdanovich at 33. I have Bjelica at 26.
Okay. All right, fair enough. And Jabari Parker and Portis, let's just get into that before we move on. I want to make sure we don't miss anything in this game because it's obviously a staple of this entire slate.
Right. So with the rules, I don't want Portis and Bryant in the same lineup because we're still seeing them basically, you know, play the 5. We're seeing Jeff Green get a little bit more time there, which has made it so Parker can get a little bit more run. So I don't think I want more than 2 of that Portis, Ariza, Parker, Green, Bryant group in a lineup, and I don't want more than 1 of Bryant, Portis. But other than that, I think you can really mix and match. You know, if you're going to get 26 to 27 minutes from Parker, potentially, he's played really well for the Wizards. Portis is around 1.2 fantasy points per minute. He's my favorite guy out of the group, but it's just a lot of interchangeable pieces. The one thing that I will add, and it's more FanDuel specific because I don't think you need it on DraftKings, but Troy Brown's playing, you know, 17, 18 minutes a night. He's 3,500 at small forward on FanDuel. This is obviously a very appealing game, and he's averaging well over a fantasy point per minute. So, you know, it's a drop play, but it's a guy that actually does have the upside if something happens and he somehow gets 22 minutes to actually be like a guy that stays in your lineup.
What's the minimum salary on FanDuel?
Yeah, he's 3,500 small forward.
All right. What do you think? Well, we'll get there. I don't want to go too far ahead of ourselves. Trying to think if there's anything else on this game. I think we've covered it all. I mean, Harrison Barnes will get the minutes. I have him at 37. We know that at least. And that's about it. You know, there's nothing else exciting about this guy whatsoever. But he's there if you need him. You know, FanDuel, small forward's pretty weak. I think...
Ridiculously good matchup for Willie Cauley-Stein. Not sure how much I can get to, but it scares me not getting there at like a
Right.
$5,700 price tag.
Yeah, and I'll add in terms of matchup as well. Bobby Portis, from a rebounding standpoint, also has a very, very good matchup. And if you were to take it a step further with Portis, there's an interesting thing here because they allow the 5th most points in the paint. Bobby Portis can do some work, outside, but also a high energy type guy that has no problem banging around the rim. I think this serves him really well in a fast paced spot. If Portis does happen to play 30 minutes here, I think you'll be very satisfied with what you get. And if Parker plays 27-28, I don't have an issue with him either. It's just all around a very enticing game. All right, let's talk about Brooklyn and Detroit, Adam. We've got the Brooklyn Nets 2-point favorites at home, 222.5 total. Kind of a fun matchup here for one reason. You have the Brooklyn Nets just fell behind the Pistons in the East. They're now 7th in the East. The Pistons are 6th. And they are, a half game separated right now. So it may not seem like much to us playing daily fantasy, but one thing that we know for sure is unless this game blows out, all of these, Atkinson and Dwayne Casey are surely going to be running their guys for heavy minutes in a very important game for both teams. That's an important thing to consider when you get into mid and late March when you're vying for or jockeying for playoff position.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that especially on the Detroit side, it's an appealing spot, pace up against Brooklyn. They've been fine defensively, but more possessions here. And Drummond, just one of my favorite plays on the slate, especially at 9,100 on DraftKings. He's been great since the start of the season, averaging about 1.3, or not the start of the season, start of January, averaging about 1.3 DraftKings points per minute. It's increased. The smaller is the more recent you get, the better he's been. It's obviously a matchup that we've seen, big, good rebounding centers have a ton of success in all season long. He's still playing big minutes in competitive games. So I absolutely love him. Blake, I think, is a good play as far as price goes. Got more of him on FanDuel than I did on DraftKings, just as a result of pricing over there being tighter, less guys in that price range that he has to compete with. But one thing I think is actually interesting once I dug into it a little bit more after the show this morning is $5,000 for Reggie Jackson on FanDuel is actually pretty appealing to me. He's played 24, 23, and 20 minutes in his last 3 games. But if you go back and look, the last game, 24 minutes against Chicago, was a 131-108 win. So that's 20 plus, 23 points. The game before that was an 8-point game, but the second unit for the Pistons got really hot. That happened in 2 different games where the Ish Smith led unit got hot. 20 minutes against Minnesota in a 15 or 16 point game. I'm not convinced that you still don't get that fourth quarter run from Jackson if the game's actually competitive down to the wire. And with his price tag falling a bit, I think that he's a pretty appealing option since people probably will be scared off by the recent minute totals.
All right. Yeah, and it's good reasoning right there with him being that cheap. I mean, look, I'm generally not big on Reggie Jackson, but this is a very much a discounted price point. And, if you're saying, would you rather play Reggie Jackson against Brooklyn or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at basically the same price against Boston? I'll take Jackson all day in that spot. Jackson's only $400 more expensive than his teammate Ish Smith on FanDuel right now. So you're right to point out that he's definitely too cheap.
And it's not like he hasn't been producing. He's 0.9 fantasy points per minute since the start of January. He's, I think, more than that since the start of February. 1.05 points per minute over his last 15 games, 27% usage, 25.8% assist percentage since the start of February.
Andre Drummond is in a spectacular spot. I mean,
yeah, no question.
There's just no 2 ways around it. When you look at Drummond, and I talk about this a lot, I know, but I'm going to repeat it again. The one thing that just stands out so much to me is, we gush over the rebounding, which is second to none. And, scoring, he has been really strong. But he also averages 1.7 steals and 1.7 blocks per game. I mean, he's so good at cushioning bad shooting performances. Nobody in the league has missed more layups than Andre Drummond, but it doesn't matter because all of those missed layups usually result in offensive rebounds,
Right.
He just finds so many ways to mitigate bad nights. And, he's faced Brooklyn twice this season averaging 1.63 fantasy points per minute, which is not a surprise. And see if the ownership updated here, because earlier today he was projected to have, it hasn't yet, projected to have around 20% ownership, which I thought was low given the matchup. Don't really care much about ownership here. I love Andre Drummond against Brooklyn. It is as good a spot as you can possibly get. He should just eat this front court alive. Let me ask you, because on DraftKings, it's not even a conversation. 10-6 on FanDuel, where Rudy Gobert is also 9,500. Where do you see yourself going most on FanDuel at center?
Jijic the most, but in that initial crunch, I basically and I didn't have it capped. I didn't have my exposures capped the way that I will when I run my actual crunches. But the only centers that I got in lineups were Jijic, Horford, and Drummond.
All right.
By the way, 1.66 DraftKings points per minute in 4 meetings with Brooklyn last season.
Yeah, that's pretty...
Rebounding last 6 games against Brooklyn in the regular season, rebounding totals of 20, 13, 27, 14, 20, and 23.
Jeez. So he's going to go out and have like an 8.9 rebound game today is what you're saying.
Most likely.
Yeah. What about Blake Griffin? 83 on DraftKings, 83 on FanDuel, actually $300 less expensive than Kevin Love. I mean, he's been pretty underwhelming recently, but his price has come down. The Brooklyn Nets aren't exactly great in terms of defending opposing power forwards either. And, you know, look, if you were to at least break this down a little bit, Blake has been active from beyond the arc, but he's good in the paint too, right? Very good in the paint. I think he's averaging like 12 points in the paint per game. Brooklyn has been terrible at defending the paint, right? This year, 3rd most points in the paint and most points per possession in the post. No team's allowing higher efficiency in the post than Brooklyn. Blake does a lot of work in the post and in the paint. So those are 2 things, if you like him, that definitely bode well for him today. But how does he fit in roster construction, if he does at all, for you on DraftKings and FanDuel?
Much more so on FanDuel for me, just because the price tag there is a lot more appealing than it is on DraftKings. It's good on DraftKings, but it's obviously whenever it's the same on FanDuel, it's more appealing there because your salary cap's higher and because overall pricing is tighter. So I got a lot more Blake over there. Even though he hasn't been very good lately, you know, the minutes have kind of been down, but in part it's been blowouts like I talked about with Reggie Jackson. But still, you know, 1.18 DraftKings points per minute since the start of February. That's not what you want out of Blake when he's like 9,500, but the price tag's just free falling. So
right.
It's still basically as cheap a price as you ever really find on Blake. So I have him behind Drummond for sure, but I'm getting a lot of him on FanDuel where I'm getting less Drummond because of their positions.
What about on the other side of this game, the Brooklyn Nets? You have Jared Allen, very cheap on DraftKings. Ed Davis, $200 above the minimum on DraftKings and FanDuel. I personally was surprised to see that he was projected to have as high ownership as he was. I mean, I get it. He's power forward eligible on FanDuel. I think we'll see some updates. I think we'll see that change, you know, now that we've had some injury news throughout the day. But, you know, Ed Davis, his minute ceiling is like 2021. You're hoping that he can just have a big game in that situation. What are we doing, and what are you doing with the Brooklyn front court?
Depends on the site. FanDuel, I really have no interest. Well, Ed Davis is okay as like your drop guy, I guess, at power forward. But Jared Allen's price tag is a lot less appealing on FanDuel. On DraftKings at 4,800, though, you know, I like him. Center is a deep position, but he should play, you know, 28, 29 minutes here in this spot. And he is a good player on a per minute basis. He's had actually success in this matchup too. You know, not that I want to rely too much on individual matchups, but I think it's worth pointing out because like Josh had mentioned this morning that it's, you know, obviously a great rebounder in Drummond and he can make life difficult, but 2 regular season games this season, Drummond played both of them, 39 DraftKings points in 30 minutes, 25.75 and 22 where he fouled out. And then last season in 2 starts, 28 and 30 and 46.5 and 32. So it at least makes me feel a little bit better that he has had the ability to do well in this matchup. I think that him and Davis both are underpriced on DraftKings, but the fact that Davis is a center as opposed to a power forward, which he should be, but the fact that he's a center just makes it tougher to get, you know, tons of him.
Right. And by the way, ownership just updated. As I expected would be the case, Andre Drummond is now projected to be the highest owned player on DraftKings at 25%, which 25% on a 6-gamer is not that crazy. Ed Davis has fallen significantly down to around 11%. That's more of what I expected,
Right.
and makes more sense now that we've gotten that news. On FanDuel, Drummond at 15%, Ed Davis at 17%, which, by the way, you can check out all of our content on awesomeo.com and get 50% off, half off your first month of membership, simply by doing this. Go to the homepage, click sign up. It's in the top left corner of the homepage. Select your plan. You can select with the Fantasy Cruncher add-on if you want. Normal plans, you'll get all of our NBA content from articles from myself and Adam and Spags and more, and the projections, the ownership projections, which we reference every show. Alex Baker, Awesomeo himself, his rankings, his content, projections for all of our other sports, NASCAR, PGA, NHL, baseball, football, everything. And a whole lot more that I'm probably not remembering right now from a lot of other great contributors. All you have to do is select your plan and use the promo code or the coupon code Deeper Dive. One word, Deeper Dive, when you sign up, and you'll be good to go. You get 50% off your first month at awesomeo.com. And also, hear me out. If you check out our YouTube videos and you're not a premium sub yet, but you'd like to see what we've got behind the curtain, we're doing a bit of a giveaway here for spring break. Yeah, we find excuses for giveaways because it's fun to give our loyal viewers free stuff. And it's pretty easy. Here's what you do. And this is how you and two friends can win a free month membership of awesomeo.com. Yes, you and two friends. Okay? So basically, go to our Twitter handle at awesomeo_com, and you will see the pinned tweet. All you do is retweet it and tag two friends, answer the question that we have on there, and you are entered for you and two friends to get a free month of awesomeo.com. Otherwise, use the promo code Deeper Dive, one word, to get 50% off your first month if you do not win. All right, Adam, now that we've got that out of the way, and we hope you and your friends do participate and win, let us know in Slack chat when you enter. We'll say hello. Anything else on Brooklyn interest you?
Not really. Dinwiddie on DraftKings, I think, is kind of interesting because he's still inexpensive and should play around 30 minutes, but there's just so many guards on this slate.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. Let's talk Houston and Charlotte then. Got a few games to go here. The Houston Rockets, 9.5-point home favorites, biggest favorite of the slate, 224 total. You had mentioned you're getting a lot of Chris Paul today. Let's talk about him first.
Yeah, just on DraftKings, not really getting to 8,900 on FanDuel, but 7,100 on DraftKings, should play 33, 34 minutes. He has about a 22% usage rate since coming back into the lineup, and I think the price tag's just too low. Obviously, if he's projected to be really highly owned, like I know he was the last time I looked, he is fadeable on a slate where there are so many guards. I'm not saying he's a must play, but because I think it's important to focus on your being contrarian within lineups and not necessarily just like fading a guy across all of your lineups because he's popular. I'm still going to have a lot of Chris Paul. I'll just make sure that I have some kind of stand in the lineups that he's in.
What about Harden?
Tougher for me to get there just because of how deep the position is and how much upside there is in guys like Beal and Mitchell that are cheaper, not to mention Kyrie at a different position and, other guys that we've talked about. So I like Harden. I like Harden more on DraftKings than I like Westbrook, but I have trouble getting to him there just because of the positions. On FanDuel, he's just more expensive at 12.4. Like this whole team's more expensive. So it's a little bit tougher because, again, you still have Beal, you still have Mitchell, you still have, other guys that you can go to.
I don't see myself getting to much Harden at all, honestly. It's really difficult to get there. By the way, you see he had 5 fouls basically to start the third quarter yesterday?
No, I didn't. I was flying yesterday. I missed everything.
Yeah. He had 5 fouls with 11 minutes to go in the third. Pretty interesting. Wow. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And still ended up playing 34 minutes. D'Antoni knows what's up. And they still ended up winning by 1 point in Dallas. Anything else for Houston? We need to talk about Clint Capella. I am personally, I don't know, you'd mentioned Clint Capella earlier. Look, I don't have an issue with him, but I just feel more comfortable paying a little bit more for Rudy Gobert on DraftKings. I mean, he's just like, I mean, Gobert's salary is unbelievable. So, and then I have Horford, not much $400 cheaper than Capella. I don't mind him. I'm just not enamored with him, and especially if he's going to have really high ownership, I don't really have an issue getting away from that. Hey, by the way, Marcus Gasol will start ahead of Ibaka if you have to make any adjustments there. All right, Adam, what about the rest of this team in the front court?
To quickly touch on the Gasol news, that makes me actually like him because when he does start, normally we've been seeing, pretty healthy run from him. Not the case last game, but I do have some interest in Gasol. But as far as Capella, I'm with you. I mean, I think he's it's a great matchup. Charlotte's been bad against centers for a long time. Zeller's out. You're going to get Biyombo and then some combination of Hernan Gomez and Frank Kaminsky. I mean, good luck. So I do really love the spot, but again, it's a deep position. He is playing through an injury. It has impacted him at least to some extent. Fareed is back for whatever, or expected back for whatever that's worth. So I like Capella. I just don't like him as much as some of the other centers. Right.
It's exactly where I'm at. PJ Tucker, say no value opened up. I would have mentioned him because he's Dan Strafford asked a great question on the early bird. He said, has any player squandered, well, I'll put it this, has any player done less with more minutes this season than PJ Tucker? I don't think there's anyone else.
Terrence Ferguson?
No, maybe, but Tucker's averaging like 35 minutes a game. You might be right. Maybe Ferguson's the guy. But Tucker's averaging 0.62 fantasy points per minute this season. It's been dreadful. I think you're right, though, on Terrence Ferguson. Let's see here. Now, mind you, he's only playing 25 minutes. 0.48. 0.48. What a beauty. And the best thing is if you brought Andre Robertson back, you'd get the exact same production from a fantasy standpoint. On the other side, Adam, with Charlotte, well, we'll start in the backcourt and work our way up. You've got Kemba Walker. He's 8,100 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's 8,800. So not a bad price point. With no Zeller, we know that doesn't help him. I'll let you touch on that. And then you have Jeremy Lamb. Nicholas Batum's playing monster minutes, and I've said it a bunch. I don't have a problem with Batum on most nights. I don't think you need to get there today, but when you're getting 38 minutes a night from him, 37 minutes a night, you can kind of overlook the lower per minute production, even though he's been better over the last month. What do you have here with the point guard and shooting guard position?
Yeah, I think it's a downgrade for Kemba without Zeller. The price tag is obviously still appealing at 8,100 on DraftKings. He's 8,800 on FanDuel, which is also a nice price tag for how many minutes he plays. And Houston has been one of the least efficient defensive teams against the pick and roll this year. Kemba leads the league, like you mentioned earlier, in pick and roll possessions. He's also one of the leaders in efficiency. So it's a good spot there. It doesn't hurt that he just lost his roll man. That, really helps him in the pick and roll. So it's basically, I guess the way I would put that is I'm certainly not giving Kemba any sort of like a manual bump or boost because of it being a favorable matchup here. I don't hate Kemba. Like, I'm not taking him out of my player pool or something like that, but I'm just not as high on him as I would be if Zeller were in. I think most of my interest in Charlotte comes from the front court here with Zeller and Marvin Williams both out. It's tough to see Frank Kaminsky not getting upper 20s or low 30s in minutes. Bismack Biyombo, I think, should probably play like 26-ish minutes because they can't go to Kaminsky and Hernan Gomez for that many minutes here. They will just get absolutely abused. So I think Biyombo at dead minimum is a pretty reasonable option, even though he's not that exciting.
Yeah, I think so too. Hernan Gomez. Well, I'll ask you, what are your minutes projections here for Hernan Gomez and Biyombo?
I have Biyombo at 26. I have Hernan Gomez at 18. I wouldn't be surprised if you got more from Biyombo and less from Hernan Gomez. I would be surprised if you got a lot of Hernan Gomez, unless it's just he's going nuts offensively and they don't care about the fact that Harden and Capella are just scoring every time down the floor.
And how many minutes do you have for Kaminsky?
30.
I have him at 32 because 30 as well, I should say. Yeah, I think Kaminsky will get some minutes at the 4 and the 5. And, since re-entering the rotation, Adam, he's actually been pretty productive, right? I mean, he's producing over a fantasy point per minute. He was already averaging 22, 23 minutes per game. And now when you look at, since he started playing, it's been 5 games, right? If you take those 5 games over that span, you have Marvin Williams and Cody Zeller averaging a combined 57 minutes per game. So it only makes sense to see Kaminsky get at least 7-8 more minutes tonight.
Yeah, I agree. And his issue has never been producing from an offensive standpoint. It's that he's an absolute liability on the other end.
Right. The only thing I could see changing it is if, Fareed comes back, doesn't really get much run, and Borrego goes small with like Bridges and up against, Tucker at the 4. It's possible, but I still think Kaminsky gets his 30 minutes, because if they were to go small there, I'd expect to see a lot of him at the 5, and then right. Hernan Gomez is the one that loses a lot of that work. So, all right. Anything else on Charlotte? You want to talk any more on Lamb or this front court?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lamb's okay, but most of my exposure will be to the front court.
All right. Let's talk about Utah and OKC. We've got the Utah Jazz at home, 3.5-point favorites, 226.5 total. No Ricky Rubio, no Raul Neto. We do have Dante Exum expected to return, but he's been out for 2 months now with, by the way, I think there's like a bone bruise in his ankle. I thought that was pretty interesting. But I don't expect him to get, well, I don't know. He was in the G League, so I guess he could play decent minutes. Yeah, I still expect, the only reason I say this is in terms of ball handling. If Exum was out there, there'd be literally nobody else on the team in terms of capable ball handling, unless you're talking about like a Grayson Allen or something. But where do you stand on Donovan Mitchell here, who has a 35.5% usage rate with no Rubio and Neto this year?
Yeah, really like Mitchell. If you look, we can actually get a decent sample size since the start of the new year with Rubio out. 37% usage, 28.8% assist percentage in 545 minutes without Rubio on the floor for Mitchell there. 1.3 fantasy points per minute. Pace-up spot, Oklahoma City defense has been struggling lately. Reasonable price tags on Mitchell, certainly on DraftKings. Pulling FanDuel up now, if I remember right, he was cheap there too. Yeah, 8,900 is fine on FanDuel when you factor in how expensive a lot of guys are on that site. So I really like Mitchell quite a bit.
All right. So do I. So do I. It's hard not to. And, I talk about playoff positioning and stuff. Oh, man, my dog's losing it on someone outside. Playoff positioning. You have another spot now where the Utah Jazz are tied for the 6th seed with the Spurs and the Clippers outside of tiebreakers, Adam. And then they are 2.5 games behind the Blazers. This is a huge game for them. I mean, you're talking about potentially facing the Thunder or, the Rockets or the Warriors. And, I still think the Warriors, despite not playing great, are still the best team in the league, and I don't feel uncomfortable saying that at all. It's a big game for Quinn Snyder's club, so I think if I'm projecting Mitchell for 36, but if he played 38, I wouldn't be surprised. It just makes me like him more. The same goes for Rudy Gobert. 7,800 on DraftKings is just silly cheap, Adam.
Yeah, no question. On the FanDuel price tag, I really just can't get to, but on DraftKings, he's one of my favorite centers. Like I have Drummond ahead of him. And then obviously I like the value that you can get at the position from mixing and matching guys like Kaminsky, Biyombo, Zizic, Chris, whatever. But out of those mid-range guys, I like Gobert. I like him more than Capella. It's a tough matchup with Steven Adams, but it's a nice matchup in that you have, a driving point guard in Russell Westbrook that will give him plenty of block opportunities. And, Gobert is just a really good player. So I think that the pace and, block upside is more important to me than the fact that he's dealing with Steven Adams.
Oh, 100%. I mean, no question. And, you look at this matchup, actually, he's faced them 3 times this season. And he's averaging his season average in per minute production right around 1.3, 1.31. So It's not like it has curtailed his production this year either. I'm not worried about it. If he was 8,800, 8,900, then we'd have a different opinion here. But the discount's already baked into the matchup's already baked into the price point.
Right.
And that to me is all I need. Royce O'Neal, I still have no interest in him. Maybe you do, so I'll let you talk about it briefly.
No, I'm good.
Okay. I love it. He's projected to have high ownership on
FanDuel's different. He's 3,500 on FanDuel. Feel free.
Yeah.
I don't see the need on DraftKings.
Right, just as a drop. Right. But on DraftKings, yeah, it's difficult to get there.
Yeah, like I'm not saying I'll have zero, but I'm saying I don't expect him to be a popular guy for me.
Yeah, for sure. All right. On the other side, unless you have anything else in Utah you want to discuss, Oklahoma City. I'm just going to throw this out there. We're making good time. I want to get 5 minutes in for the last game here. Paul George. So here's the deal with Paul George. Obviously, he's too cheap on DraftKings. Like $9,500 for a guy that's been, in the MVP race over the last couple of months is too cheap. But I'm just throwing this out there. Let the audience decide. Let the viewers decide. In 3 starts since returning to the lineup, he's shooting 31% from the field and 25% from long range. In 2 games before his injury, he shot 25% from the field and 22% from beyond the arc. So, look, he's lost that magic that had him entrenched in the MVP discussion earlier. Is it regression or is he going through a slump? So, honestly, the approach that I've talked about today is just essentially trying to match the field on him on DraftKings because I don't want to get burned by George if he breaks out of this and have none of him. And I also don't want to go super overweight and have him continue to shoot dreadfully from the field. Yeah, I get it. He went to the line 20 times in overtime against Portland, but the shooting has been concerning. And I've watched these games. He's way short and he's way long on a lot of these. He's not rimming out every shot. That's my take on George. Go ahead, Adam. You can discuss the OKC team as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you there. The DraftKings price tag is still just too cheap for me to ignore.
Yeah.
Westbrook is site dependent for me. Much more interested in him on FanDuel than I am on DraftKings. You get an $1,100 difference between him and Harden on FanDuel. You just have tougher pricing on FanDuel. On DraftKings, they're just guys I'd rather get to. Obviously he dropped 81 in overtime the last time he faced Utah, but I think it's worth pointing out that this is still a particularly bad matchup for a player like Westbrook. In that last game, he shot 6 of 13 from 3. This guy is an atrocious three-point shooter. You don't want to count on this guy shooting 50 or close to 50% from 3. It's a very good overall defense, so that should limit his conversion rate on his potential assists. It's a very good team in terms of rim protection, which is where Westbrook actually needs to score because he's not able to knock down 6 threes most nights. So I don't want to read really anything into the fact that he had a monster game against them last time. I think that you still can roster him, especially again on FanDuel, because it is Russell Westbrook. He is going to play 36 minutes. He is going to do everything he can to get as many stats as possible, but it's about as bad a matchup for Westbrook as you can get.
It really is. Any other interest in OKC?
No, it really falls off for me after those 2.
Yeah, me too. And even if you like Steven Adams, there are a lot of centers that just are more appealing on both sites. But he's not a terrible player. It's still Rudy Gobert, and he's not. I won't waste time there. Let's talk about the Clippers and Boston. We'll close this out, Adam. Celtics 2-point road favorites. They look like they may have figured something out recently, beating Golden State in Golden State. Although I will say that was that was dampered a bit by the fact that Phoenix just beat them at the Oracle. By the way, I laid $100 on Phoenix to win outright last night after the third quarter at plus 750. And that ended up pretty nice. I'm not going to lie. That was a good one. I mean,
yeah, it's all
obviously a massive risk, but when the Warriors suck in the third quarter, I just get, it's like when the Warriors are garbage in the third quarter, generally they don't turn it on in the fourth. They usually turn it on after halftime, but man, yeah, they just lost to Phoenix. Phoenix has now beaten the Bucks and the Warriors over the last week. Maybe Kokoshkov keeps his job. That's neither here nor there, though, Adam. 226 total. Let's talk about the Clippers first.
Yeah, so It's obviously not a really appealing matchup for the Clippers, but I do still think that Lou Williams is appealing, especially in tournaments. Like, I don't think you need to go there in cash games. There are a million other spots to go. I would much rather go to Buddy Hield in any format, but definitely in cash. Um, but I think people probably shy away from Williams a bit because of the matchup. But he's just been incredibly good with about a 34% usage rate since the Tobias Harris trade, playing 28 to anywhere between 28 and 32 minutes, really. I expect this to be a good basketball game. So, I think Williams is appealing. I think that Gallinari, again, it's never the most exciting play on Gallinari, but he does have a 27% usage rate without Tobias Harris on the floor this season. He's been, good enough to where with small forward eligibility, he's kind of interesting. Same goes for Montrezl Harrell, who, like, I'd rather roster Al Horford. I'd rather roster Blake Griffin. There's a handful of power forwards I'd rather roster, but it's not that I dislike Harrell so much as I just like those other guys more. So no real priorities for me from the Clippers, but I do think that there's tournament upside in those guys.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of interest at all here, so let's move to the other side. You have any questions, feel free to hit us up on Twitter at Laffy_D, at ShipMyMoneyDFS. Our handles are right below our heads. Or if you're a premium member, you can hit us up in Slack chat. We'll be there leading up to lock. Always happy to answer your questions, along with Josh and Eddie and everybody else. Those boys are coming up for live before lock right after us. Take you up till 7 p.m. Eastern time. Boston Celtics, Kyrie Irving, 8,900. No Jason Tatum. Al Horford, power forward, center eligible, 66 on DraftKings, 71 on FanDuel. I like both of these guys quite a bit. I understand if you were to look at like a Jaylen Brown or such, but Kyrie Irving at sub 9K, even 98 on draft, FanDuel isn't crazy. And Al Horford at that price in these matchups, especially Horford against the Clippers team that has struggled mightily against opposing centers even since the deadline. Both of those guys are firmly in play for me. Where are you going with Boston today?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, especially, the 8,900 price tag on DraftKings for Kyrie. 9,800 on FanDuel is fine as well. But the 8,900, really sticks out here in a pace-up spot against the Clippers. No Tatum, which it's not a huge deal. He's like a 22% usage guy, but it shouldn't hurt. Kyrie, with everything going on around this team over the last couple of weeks, from a fantasy production standpoint, he's still been very good. Should play 35, 36 minutes, assuming that this game is competitive down to the wire. So, I like him. I'm with you there. Al Horford potentially picks up a couple of extra minutes. Without Tatum, they'll need more scoring. They need, facilitator out there in Horford. So I have him projected for 32 minutes here, but a really, really good matchup against the Clippers. He just does everything when he's on the floor. So power forward eligibility on DraftKings is really valuable for him. And then with the wings, I basically just have a rule not to get more than two of the Morris, Brown, Smart, Hayward group. But I think you get around 30 minutes from all of them. Brown, Morris, and Hayward, obviously all cheaper than Smart and more appealing, especially because of their positions. But, I like mixing and matching those guys, kind of like we do with the Wizards front court.
All right. So do I. Anything else here on Boston? Any deeper you want to go here?
No, I think that, I have Hayward, Morris, and Brown all with like identical point per minute rates and similar minutes projections.
All right, well, that'll do it for us. As always, thanks for hanging around. A lot of NFL news happening right now. This is a pretty exciting day. So I'll be checking that out while answering questions and getting ready, of course, for this slate. Stick around. Live Before Lock coming up next with Josh Engelman and Fast Eddie Fia. Before you head out, hit us with a like. It's greatly appreciated and does us many favors, and we certainly appreciate you for it. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and head over to the Live Before Lock coming up right after us. Good luck tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Deeper Dive.